Welcome to the Minotaur's Maze. My guest today is Alexander Cortes, who is a personal trainer, writer, dancer, and solo entrepreneur. He provides advice on training, fitness, and nutrition to help people get leaner, stronger, and smarter. His prolific writing has amassed a 90,000 strong following on Twitter, a massive email list, and a private community for men. Alexander, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you for having me on.
Now,
much appreciated.
There's so much advice on fitness out there, and obviously I've been following you for some time now, and what I get from you is that 90 to 95%, probably more, of the advice on fitness is just wrong. What's happened? You know, why is there such a difference of opinion, and why is there so much wrong advice out there?
I would frame the problem as a philosophical problem, actually, which requires, as I like to say, backing up so many steps and really re-examining the perspectives and premises of how we approach fitness and health at large. What does that mean? You know, that sounds very smart. What does that mean? The problem is just fundamentally the way people think about their health. So something, let's say, like fat loss. I want to lose body fat. Very common desire for most people. They want to lose body fat. All right, so how are we going to go about accomplishing that? If you follow, let's just say, mainstream fitness narrative slash mind slash perspective, your first order of action will probably be that you need to find a diet that will somehow deliver fat loss, and you have to do the diet, and hopefully the diet works, and maybe it will restrict carbohydrates, maybe it will restrict processed foods, maybe it will restrict meat, maybe there'll be some form of restriction, there'll be some things you can eat, cannot eat, and you get the outcome you want. And that's not incorrect, but undergoing that process, you haven't actually learned anything about how fat loss actually works on a very basic level at all. And maybe you really don't want to know, maybe you're not interested in knowing, but that lack of intellectual both curiosity and just sheer lack of knowledge in regards to the process that you're trying to undertake, that's going to eventually undermine you. In the years I've been training clients, I've been a personal trainer now for going on 11 years. One of the big points I always make when I would first get a new client, so I'm intaking a person, I'm assessing them, and we're doing an interview, is that I want them to learn things from a first principle basis. So when we're talking about, let's say, lifting weights, it's not about the implement, it's not about whether the barbell is superior to the dumbbell, whether the dumbbells are better than machines, or machines bad, is this good? I'm like, it's not about good or bad, it's about context. Do you know why you're lifting weights in the first place? Well, what do you mean? I'm like, do you realize that you live in a gravity-based environment? Your body needs muscle to move. If I drop my phone right now, I drop anything, it goes straight down towards the ground. So gravity is this omniscient force that shapes our ability to locomote and our bodily motion from the time we're born to the time we die. Do you understand that? Most people they've never thought of that. Like, okay, like, yeah, gravity exists, obviously. All right, so when you're lifting anything, you are challenging yourself with gravity. More gravity or less gravity. Everything comes down to that, again, that basic principle. Oh, wow, that's a very different way of looking at the problem, looking at the process. Same thing for fat loss. Do you understand fundamentally that your body needs food to not die? I'd always make that point, like, you need food to not die. Yes, I do. Okay. Do you understand that your body itself is made out of what you eat? And people think about, like, oh yeah, that's true. This is not conjecture. Everything that you intake, what you consume, you become. Okay. Would paying attention to the quality of what you consume influence your health in some way? Like, does that seem reasonable to you? It's like, yeah, that seems logical, right? So I'd have all these sort of philosophical, like, questions, lines of thinking I'd go on, And then over time, the person, their mindset would fundamentally change, because rather than approaching their health as a problem they have to sort of beat down, their health is now something that's sort of like an enjoyable puzzle. It's a source of knowledge about themselves that they get to learn about, and it's very accessible that way. And how you frame the problem is going to influence how you approach the problem, learn about the problem. But like this, having this conversation, hopefully the people listening are like, oh, well, that makes sense. Like, it's a different way of looking at things. But that's what's lacking in most fitness as a whole. The majority of fitness advice that's mainstream is extremely prescriptive. So the way that people wish there was a pill for fat loss or a pill for exercise, they want a very binary, do this, don't do that kind of prescription for something like working out, something like going to the gym, something like what's the best routine? I don't know. How many days a week do you have to train? I could train 5 days. Okay, are you going to train 5 days, or you think you would? Or are you actually going to train 3 days consistently? Like, what are you going to consistently do? 3 days. Okay. Have you ever trained before? No. Okay. Now I have like 20 other questions I could ask the person, but again, like, this becomes context. The best given course of action for any given situation is contextually dependent upon the situation itself. There's all these parameters you have to assess. If you're really going to do things to the utmost effectiveness, if you just want generic advice, I mean, that's very easy to find. But what do most people inevitably struggle with? They try this, they try that, they try this, they try that. Nothing works that well. Why is it not working? Is there something wrong with them? So it's always this very frustrating no man's land position to be in, I think, for most people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you started that question, well, answering that question with, talking about philosophy, and most people would never think about philosophy when they're talking about training and fitness. So what made you think about philosophy in terms of fitness and training? Was it because of the accident that you had with your dancing career, and you started to think about this more, or was it something you were always kind of aware of and went down that road?
Taking the philosophical or open-minded perspective, or a different thinking perspective, I don't know that I could attribute to any one area. I was very much a reader as a kid. Yeah, I still am. I mean, if I had to sort of point back to a moment in time, I don't know that I could really find one per se.
Mm-hmm.
I was always very influenced by, I mean, if I could really pick out an influence, I was very much a comic book reader as an adolescent, and Batman was my favorite character. And Batman, part of his appeal was that he trained both his mind and his body, and it was those two things operate on an infinite loop. One leads to the other. You can't separate them. And then getting into, let's say, very generically, Eastern philosophy, Oriental philosophy. I mean, this is very level 101, level 50 stuff. I'm not going to go in depth, but if you get into the very basic principles of Buddhism, or even the very basic principles of Ayurvedic yoga philosophy, Hinduism, and this idea that the body exists in a material state, but also your body, puts you, into the realm of the mind, and your relationship between the two is going to influence the quality of your life as a whole. That was very influential, and I realized when I started training people that people's relationship with their health and their physical body was very much their relationship with the rest of their life. Again, you couldn't separate the two. It was very. I've never really encountered it where somebody was in a very poor state of physical health while also having excellent mental health, while also having a very satisfying life. I've never really seen that. I've seen people where, maybe to some level they're able to accept that, their health is not a priority for them. But when you're physically suffering, you're in pain, or you're slow, you're low energy, you're making compromises on your sleep, on your recovery, on your well-being. When you're making compromises that way, that has an inevitable carryover, bleed-over effect to all the other types of decisions you make. If one of the things one of the critical decisions mistakes people often make early on, let's say with careers, once you make an agreement with yourself that it's okay for you to be tired all the time, that you're going to accept I'm going to accept not getting enough sleep. I'm going to accept that I need coffee to function. I'm going to accept that this is just how it is, and I can't do anything about it because I need to work X amount, and I'm going to let that aspect of my health decline. Once you make that agreement, then everything else is on the table and fair game to be compromised. It's all right, I'm not going to sleep enough. All right, I'm also not going to eat well because one leads to the other. I'm also not going to exercise because you don't have the energy. Oh, then I'm also going to have to accept that my body fat's going to increase. Oh, well, I guess that's going to happen too as a result. So you have these second, third, even fourth order effects pile up. But where did it start? It started with you deciding that it was okay that you were not going to get enough sleep. So once I saw that relationship at play so much with people where health is bad, life is bad. Health is bad, life is bad. Health is bad, life is bad. How do you then go about solving that? Because the traditional prescriptive parameters for fitness, where here's your exercise, here's your diet, like that's going to address that problem, but the actual problem itself is everywhere else. So we can carve out a section of it and take sort of the square out of the out of the triangle that way. Like, oh well, I fixed this problem. Yeah, but that problem also has 10 other problems that are related to it. Everything has a sort of chain of consequence. So like, what do you want to solve? Do you want to solve the one thing, or do you want to solve all of it at once? So what's the root to all of these issues? Yeah, and the root inevitably is people's psychology, it's their mindsets, how they approach life as a whole, how they think about things in general, both generally and specifically. So then you have to approach it from a mental standpoint. And then once you do that, then you realize the physical stuff's easy. It's very easy to give prescriptions that way. Here's a good workout. Do push-ups and chest press and dips. There's your chest workout. It's good. It's good. Thumbs up. That doesn't solve your lack of motivation. It doesn't solve your lack of self-esteem. It doesn't solve your lack of confidence. It doesn't solve that you are uncertain going to the gym. It doesn't address any of the actual problems. I've just given you a list of exercises. So for people that are very self-motivated, self-driven, maybe all they need is a prescription. But that's not most people. If it was, Western society would not have a 70-80% obesity rate of being we're not overweight. What is it now? I think it's about 80% of people in like the United States at least are overweight. So 3 out of 4 people have excess body fat. So like clearly it's not a prescription problem. It's a psychological, social problem.
So when you work with clients, then do you work on the psychological aspect straight away, or do you just give them the fitness program and work on the psychology? So say, for example, somebody's really stuck right now. They've got bad diet, they've got bad health, but they've got very low self-esteem, low confidence. Business isn't going well, their job isn't going well because of the coronavirus. They're just absolutely stuck right now, and they don't know which way to move. In terms of practical steps, what's the first thing they should be doing to get themselves out of that hole?
Well, this is the paradoxical irony, you could say. When your life and your health are out of control, I would argue the best thing you can do for yourself is to very simply start a consistent exercise routine. Not just for the sake of exercise, but to have something to anchor habitual construction on. So if I can get you doing one thing each day that's good for you, that's a very key point. If I can get you doing one thing each day, whether it be 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, where that hour of time is you doing something that is good for your health, mentally, physically, now we have something that we can build upon. If you don't have that, though, and life is in disarray, where life is chaotic, then you have no psychological substrate where you can put a foundation of better thinking on it at all. You don't have anything. That's why I think it's a very old historical idea, an ancient idea that exercise, and I should say not exercise, that health is sort of a vector for truth. If you know what's healthy for you, then you know what's good for you. If you don't know what's healthy for you and you're not doing anything to make yourself healthy, your ability to discern and filter between good and bad is going to be fundamentally altered. You're going to lack that filter. You're not going to have it. That will lead to poor decision making. So if I can get you doing something very basic, let's say like 100 push-ups a day, like or even 50, 50, 100, let's say 100. I want you to do 100 push-ups every day. Okay, just that. Like, don't have a complaint, just do that thing. There's going to be soreness, there's going to be fatigue, perhaps you get some muscle growth from it, but I'm entraining the brain, I'm entraining your mind to do something with consistency, which is probably lacking in most areas of your life. And from that consistency, we can then add to it. Add what? Maybe it's more exercise, maybe it's just better habits. But in doing that one thing every day, inevitably, your hours will have to adjust themselves to accommodate for it. And that's going to bring some order to your existence. And what makes people feel safe? Certainty, order, stability, security. What's a very easy way to go about that? train at the same time every day, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 5 p.m., whichever time, same time every day, do the same things. Okay, now we have some stability. What else can we make more stable? So that gives you a starting point.
Brilliant. And you've touched upon it there. So, obviously you've touched upon the obesity numbers and the issues, but the foundational problems is the lack of self-esteem and the lack of confidence. So in your opinion, why do you think it's not just the Western, it's a global thing, why has self-esteem suffered so much? What is the root cause for such poor self-esteem and confidence and mindset in modern day society?
You know what? That's a really good question. That's a very good question. If you take, like, it's very popular now to, like, quote Western society this, Western society that. Like, it is, obviously. And it can certainly be said that Western society has a psychological, spiritual malaise to it, where people, they feel uncertainty about the future, both on a broad level, societal level, both on an individual level. And anytime you're uncertain about the future, your certainty in yourself is probably going to be less than what you would want it to be. One of the hallmarks of a thriving and prosperous society is that people feel positive about the future. And typically, that usually leads to an increase in self-esteem or self-confidence. But why is self-esteem at an all-time low? This is very multifactorial. I would attribute it to, on a very broad level, that because society across the world, not just in the United States or Western Europe, but even in India, even in Southeast Asia, technology has changed the way society communicates so rapidly. And whereas 50 years ago, 100 years ago, even 20 years ago, your frame of comparison to what was a good life was vastly more limited. So if you were growing up in, I don't know, let's say 1980s India, I've lived in India for a period of time, not in the 80s, but you're growing up in, it's 1980s, it's India, you're living in Mumbai, or I think it was Bombay then, still. You're living in Bombay, you could watch probably American movies, maybe some television shows, but you're not on the phone looking at how people live in America. The same way that people in America were not on the phone and able to look up places in India. But everywhere in the world today, because of technology, you have the ability right at your fingertips where you can see how other people live. And you can see extreme wealth, you can see extreme decadence, you can see extreme levels of success. And most of the cultural figures that we esteem, idolize, look up to today, they're billionaires, they're superstar level athletes, global level athletes. There's a lot of them now, more than there were in the past. So whereas 50 years ago, your definition of what a successful life was limited to your geographic location, now you almost have a global definition. You can, if you're a young man, you can see older men who have cars. Let's assume they're successful, but they have cars, they have women, they're fit, they're living this incredible lifestyle that is so far beyond what you live right now. How do you possibly get there? How do you get there? So I think that plays a major role, definitely. Certainly in the dating market, the same thing for a lot of people. I have a lot of younger followers, men and women, and that's something that they really struggle with. Obviously, women, it's a very easy thing. They can get on Instagram, they can look up 1,000 girls that are hotter than them. If you're a guy, you can get on Instagram, you get on YouTube, you can see 1 million guys that are taller, fitter, more muscular, more ripped than you are. Oh man, I'm never going to look like that. Gee, you feel bad about yourself now. So on and so forth. Even economically, globalization has been good. Certainly, you could argue for general economic commerce, global prosperity. There's more money flowing through the system than ever before, but it's also become more competitive. Silicon Valley is super competitive. I know, India. Yes, because I have a lot of Indian followers. India is hyper competitive. The job market, the education market, what college you into, test scores, people live and die by that. 40 years ago, again, it was smaller. You were competing with less people. Now everything is on a global stage in some level or another. So I think the self-esteem crisis, a lot of it. I mean, that's if I could attribute to one root cause, it's trying to struggle against a system that you feel so small in, and to dominate a global system, you have to make yourself massive. That seems to be the path for people. How else do you do it? And there's some rejection of that now. I do see this tonal shift of people wanting to live more like go local is the term. Going local, I want to live like a traditional life. I want to have a farm. I want to sort of get away from this like very intersected technologified civilization, which is very understandable. So you're seeing a pushback against it, but at the same time, there's millions of people that they're living in the thick of it. They're living in the thick of it, and they're scraping to get by. And in the United States, if you want to be in the 1%, you have to make $250,000 a year, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money anywhere in the world. If you're in New York, you have to make basically $500,000 a year. And that's not even to be competitive. That's just to sort of keep up with the standard of like what a successful person is. That's not ultra successful. That's just being, mildly esteemable. Like, oh, you're doing pretty good. Yeah, but there's someone else who's making $10 million a year, or they're a billionaire. Then even countries that didn't have billionaires before now have billionaires. So I get like more money through the system. It becomes a more competitive system. But how do people feel good about life that way? When they realize how much they're going to have to climb. So, I don't have a meta point to that, but I think that's where a lot of like the root. I would say that's where like that is a very sort of like deeply rooted part of the root issue, and then you can start stacking things on top of that, like wealth inequality, economic inequality, classism. You could talk about the food industry. Obviously people being overweight, an obesogenic environment. But if you want to go very, very deep, I would say it's that.
Okay, and so obviously there's a lot to unpack in there, but you talked about people maybe feeling stuck in the system. So I've heard a lot of people saying they want to get off the grid, they want to go there, but it's not practical for most people. So what else can people do to maybe not come out of the system, but use the system to their advantage to create a life for themselves which works for them? Because I think you've probably done that better than most people. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your journey and then what advice you had for other people to do something similar.
That's also a good question. So I guess at this point I could qualify myself as being an entrepreneur, entrepreneurial at least. What I saw when I was growing up, this is very much 1990s. That's when I came of age. So I was born in '89, so millennial. 1990s, at least in the United States, was a tone of like general prosperity. There was this assumption that the future would keep getting better and better and better, and that's what I remember as a kid. Life seemed good. There was no uncertainty at all. That changed somewhat with 9/11, but at the same time, those wars, those conflicts, they were far away. So the day-to-day life was not affected in the United States. I never thought about economics, never thought about the system being rigged against anybody. I didn't question the narrative at all because there was no reason to. Why would I? I was young, but life seemed good. The thing that changed my mindset fundamentally was a few things, but the first one was going to school in San Francisco. So I went to San Francisco State University, which is San Francisco has always been a nexus of like far like liberal, left wing, thought ideology, and I was exposed to a lot of thinking there that seemed to be logically bankrupt. I remember, like, let's say distinctly an experience where this was 2008, I want to say. It was the Great Recession in the United States, the global recession. The county where I grew up in California, it was something that like 1 in 4 to almost 1 in 3 people lost their homes, which was a lot of people. Literally everybody knew someone who'd lost their home. So I saw this radical shaking. I saw this sort of radical breakdown, like the system in regards to having a house was not an asset. Having a job was not that reliable. I saw my parents end up losing their home. And that made me question the narrative where, like, okay, like, again, I never thought about this before. I'm like, the whole time growing up, the advice we got as a kid, like, go to college, get a good job, buy a house. That didn't work out well for a lot of people. Why did it not work out well? I remember being in San Francisco and the state was bankrupt. California had a $50 billion budget deficit, and it did, because I realized that California does not manage its money well at all. It's a very rich state, but it just has very bureaucratically corrupt government. and there was protests at the schools that the state was stealing money from like the school system, and there was budget cuts to the state university system, and the state wasn't stealing money; it didn't manage money well at all, and it had this massive shortfall. And being exposed to that kind of like left wing ideology, I'm like, it didn't make sense to me. Or like, their answer, like the answers that I was getting from like these crowds and these protests were like, well, we need communism. We need to like seize the wealth. I'm like, what wealth? Like, how are you gonna? It didn't make sense. I'm like, how are you gonna actually effectively systematically orchestrate that? Like, what's gonna actually change? But there were no good answers. It was just rhetoric. It was these demands that we made. And I saw the beginnings of what would become like social justice warrior thinking, or wokeism, as what it's called now. But I saw the beginnings of that, being in these classes where everything was very genderfied, everything was based on race, critical race theory, and none of it made sense. I'm like, stuff like, the concept of like racism, like if you're not anti-racist, then you're racist. But if you are being anti-racist, that meant you're racist before. Like I grew up in a very mixed race family. Like I've never in my life thought about that. That's how the world works. Like that's a very oppressive way to view literally everything. Just it frames everything in this power oppressor model. So like there was that thinking, and then and then like the economic stuff. After my parents lost their home, and I saw teachers get fired, I saw people let go. I saw lots of people with what were supposedly stable jobs that end up not having jobs. And throughout my 20s, throughout the time in college and from years after, I would travel around the United States, and I was in economically depressed areas. I was in parts of like the southern United States where people's jobs had been legitimately shipped to China. I'm like, oh, that really is a thing. Oh, geez. I was in places where coal plants had been shut down because of economic policy. I was in places where the quality of life had declined because wages had gone down because of various trade deals. And I realized the world is very interconnected this way. But the rhetoric that I've been led to believe growing up, which was sort of this neoliberal world model that everything is always better for everybody. I'm like, no, there's lots of people hurting. Like clearly there are people being left out of the system. And then at the same time, I'm feeling all these experiences. I'm sort of like trying to rearrange my thought processes. I'm like, okay, how do I make sense of the world now? Because I guess what I would call like sort of the neoliberal economic model, this clearly doesn't work for lots of people. People are left behind economically, socially. This belief that the future is automatically getting better for everyone. This is not true. This is not true at all. I remember I think it was the TARP Act in like 2008, 2009. So the banks go bankrupt, Lehman Brothers, we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars in assets, and the government just buys all the debt. And then that was a weird thing at the time. Like, how did the U.S. government buy $800 billion of debt? Like that's a staggering sum of money to think about, right? Like $800 billion. I'm like, how do you just make that go away? Like growing up, I grew up very blue collar. I'm like, if you had even a little bit of debt, it's like, oh man, you owe money. But apparently, if you have enough debt, it can just go away. I'm like, okay, like how does that work? So then I started reading the Federal Reserve System, and that's its own rabbit hole. But okay, so the U.S. has this Federal Reserve. It's actually not part of the U.S. government, but it basically prints dollars for the U.S. government. Like where is this money coming from? To my knowledge, before this, I had assumed that money was based on something real. I was like, oh, it's just based on the presumption that inflation will increase forever and that we'll always have debt. Doesn't seem like it makes sense. I had thought actually dollars were based on gold. They're not, obviously. I'm like, that how did that happen? And then I sort of went into like the history of banking in the United States as like in central banking and international banking. I'm like, wow, this seems kind of rigged, this system. But like but telling people that's a rigged system, okay, well, what are you going to do about it, right? Like that's always the big question. So I had all these questions about the world that I didn't have nice answers for, and the answers I got were all either that it's a conspiracy theory or, like what are you going to do about it? Like oh well, this is how it works. I'm like, I didn't like any of the answers I got, and it disincentivized me from ever wanting to have a real job because that didn't seem like a stable situation at all. It didn't. But the way I framed this many times for people to get into sort of this, whatever you want to call it, the rabbit hole of having the veil pulled back, you take the red pill, whatever. Okay, you find out what's not true. But finding out something that is untrue does not reveal to you the path of truth that you should take. I could very readily point out something that's false. But via negativa doesn't necessarily tell you like, okay, well, now you know it's not real. Well, what do you do now? Like there weren't any answers that way. So I got into personal training because my bachelor's degree, which is a Bachelor's of Arts in Dance and Performance Choreography, I realized very quickly in college was absolutely worthless.
So why did you pick that degree? Let's just stop that. I don't mean to interrupt, but why did you pick that
no, not at all.
at the time? Do you remember why you picked it? Did you have ambition with that degree? So, you've gone through this process of asking these questions, but where was the direction of your life going in your mind before you had all of these discoveries?
Well, here's the thing. I know this is very disjointed. I never was a goal setter from a young age that way. So I was rebellious, not in the sense where I was trying to do bad things, but I hated the system. I hated school. I wouldn't consider myself a dumb person, but I hated school. Every year in school, from kindergarten up to the time I graduated, was an aching slog that felt like it passed. It felt like it was like trying to pour cement through an hourglass. Mm-hmm. And I don't like systems. I have a very strong, I have a very adverse reaction to being told what to do by anybody. So I didn't want to have a real job. Mm-hmm. I couldn't picture having what most people deem a real job. Mm-hmm. I didn't like waking up. I didn't like having to get dressed for something. Seeing, especially during the 1990s, early 2000s, corporate culture was very dominating. If you wanted to get rich, well, go into finance, and you wear a suit and tie, and you show up, and you're going to manage financial instruments, and I could not imagine my life doing that. So I was in high school at the time, and I was being told, like, you got to go to college. Everyone has to go to college. If you don't go to college, you never make money. You'll be a failure. Only stupid people don't go to college. You're not stupid. Okay, I have to go to college. And this was like a fight with my parents about this. And so I was very adamant, like, I don't want to go to college. Well, what are you going to do? Who's ever going to hire you for a job? It's like, damn it. All right. So at the time, I had just gotten into dancing. This was like sophomore year of high school. And I was really enjoying dance. Not because anyone told me to. I just loved it myself. There was no mimetic replication of seeing a person and wanting to imitate them. I just discovered it. I'm like, I'm doing this purely for me. And I looked up whether colleges had dance degrees, and they did, actually. It turned out you could get a degree in dance, which is worthless, but you can. So that became what I decided I was going to do. Like, all right, I'll get a dance degree. I'll go to college, I'll get a dance degree. Now, that ended up not working out because I got very injured while I was in college. I had some pretty bad injuries. So like the dream of being a professional dancer got destroyed pretty fast. But that was the plan at the time. I thought I'd go to college, get a dance degree, and then I'll dance professionally, and I can make my own schedule. I can be an artist, and that seems fun. Okay. That ended up not. Yeah. So that to answer that question, hopefully that kind of did.
Yeah. No. So yeah, that happened. Then you've obviously gone through this process of questioning the system. You don't like the system. So what then did you do to climb out of that system to build yourself where you are now? And what are some of the actionable takeaways other people can do that are feeling stuck in a similar situation?
Yes. Well, let me see if I can make this actually pragmatically useful. So I'm in college. I get the dance degree. I realize that I have no job future at all. I have no job skills. The one thing I knew I was into was I really like to work out. I love being in the gym. I love fitness. And I looked it up, and as it turned out, you can get certified as a personal trainer in a weekend. So like a 2-day workshop, you're certified. And personal training typically starts at $15 an hour, and which is more than the minimum wage. So it was the only thing I could find that would pay me more than the minimum wage that I was qualified to do. So that's what I started doing. And as it turned out, I was never passionate about fitness, but I do love to teach. So it was very enjoyable in that aspect. But I realized a few years into it, probably within the first year, I'm like, I don't want to work hourly the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to do that. And let me preface, like, I had no education, any kind of inkling of like how to think like a business person. Like very basic things like leveraging your time, creating systems, getting paid more beyond than the hour in which you work. Like not getting paid by the hour. Like that was. As I learned these things in my early 20s, they were revelations. My narrative growing up was that you get a job, you get paid good, and I just sort of presumed that rich people must get paid a lot per hour. Like that's how I thought it worked. How do people even get rich? I really didn't know, right? Like I had no clue. But I remember this was like 2010. I read The 4 Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss, and that was the first book I read where I'm like, oh wow, like you could make something, in this case like a business / website, and you can get paid, but you're not working, which is so basic, right? But again, at the time I was like, wow, that's crazy. So then I was like, all right, I'm like, but I don't know anything that I could get paid for not working that I could make. So I kept on doing fitness, and what happened was over a period of time is I realized that if you create a large enough skill set / knowledge base, you're able to solve expensive problems for people, painful problems. You can then leverage that skill base and that knowledge into something that it can provide services and products that you don't necessarily need to be present for. I mean, this is what business is it not? So then when I started researching different industries, things like finance, the service industry, even things like products, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes more sense. Now you look at the world, it's like, I bought a phone. Someone designed this phone, someone came up with the idea, but they're not literally making it, someone else is making it. So then I started to think, okay, with fitness, how could I use fitness as a path towards financial freedom entrepreneurship? And I had this moment like, if I do this long enough, and at that point it had been about 4 years, if I do this long enough where I can, again, get that skill-based knowledge base to offer people packaged solutions, for their fitness problems, I could create a business out of that where my time is now leveraged. So I could make more money. I could have that financial freedom that I wanted. And that's what I did. So that was around 2013. And I mean, it took obviously time where I was learning how to write. So it was writing online. I worked for other people. I saw what worked and what didn't. I studied various companies, various individuals. And it was right around 2014, 15 where I started to see the rise of sort of like these solo entrepreneurs, where they had these skill sets, they had done a somewhat conventional path, but they had taken that knowledge, packaged it, bundled it, and they were teaching other people. And that gave them that leverage. So I'm like, okay, so if I just keep building the knowledge base, I can get that leverage. And social media made this easy, obviously, because social media democratizes the sharing of knowledge and information, which is huge for people. You have this infinite ability now where you can teach an unlimited number of people at once. There's no limit to how many people I can have as clients or I can have as followers. There's no limit to how many people can learn from me. And that's probably what changed the game. Or right around 2016, which was my last year working for someone else, I realized that, you know what, you have enough knowledge, you've been training now a long period of time where you can put yourself into that position of building a business. But the knowledge and the skill had to come first. I mean, for people who are stuck right now, like, to sort of address the question, like it's okay to be stuck, and it's also okay to work a regular job. Yeah, I know there's oftentimes a sort of like an anti-ethical attitude of like, don't work a regular job, don't go to college, don't do this, do that. I'm like, if you can create something from a young age where you're suddenly leveraging your time getting paid, that's fantastic. But to understand how systems work and to have a business mindset, I would suggest getting educated and working for a business or working for someone else that has a business, whether it be a large one or a small one. You need that base of skills. So for most people, you're going to have, could be quite a few years where you are selling time for money. But as the value of your time and the value of your work rises, hopefully linearly then exponentially, then you'll eventually get to a point where you can create that life for yourself that's more custom designed. But how much time would that take? I would say that would take reasonably 5 to 10 years. So they can, and then well, how do you do that could be daunting. I'm like, okay, like that might seem daunting, but if you have the vision and you have the willingness to learn, and you have the time, we all have the time, then what's stopping you? What's going to stop you is your motivation for actually achieving that.
Brilliant. And obviously, part of your journey has been, the prolific writing. So it's not just the fitness; it's the writing, and it's the general advice about what it is to be a man, and also the history lessons. I mean, I've got one. I'm going to show you. I've got a diary entry here, so I'm just going to read something out, and it's it's a diary entry that I put in on the 19th of October in 2018. And it's from one of your emails dated 30th of June 2018. And I'm just going to read out the extract. It's, Unlike working with men, where I have an underlying fury that a man has allowed himself to become a fallen, fat caricature of his masculine potential and has abandoned the heroism of his youth in exchange for a beer gut and resembling 10 pounds of soy stuffed into 51 pounds bag, and now needs another man to unfuck and get him to basic standards of strength that he himself should be perfectly capable if he remotely cared about not dishonoring his family. And I think that even finished off with men. You should feel bad, because if this was 10,000 BC, you'd be functionally fucking useless and dead. And you sure as hell would not be reproducing, because who would want your sad genetics? No one, because they are soy. Do your goddamn push-ups. Now, that is obviously not a very conventional style of writing, but that inspires and motivates a group of people, and it infuriates another group of people. Now, at the time, 2 years ago, I have had a pretty good life. Like, I've had good role models, I've had good parents, I've had good education. I became a lawyer. So I've gone through the system, and, I'm making decent money, but every day I'm waking up feeling depressed or miserable, and life's not working, and I'm reading your emails, and these are the things that are inspiring me and helping me get through. So firstly, I mean, you have kind of touched upon it, but this is such a widespread thing where men are suffering from self-esteem, and I didn't know what it was, and I'm still working through that process right now. But why does your style of writing inspire some and infuriate others, and is it deliberate, or did you develop that over time as something that was working, or is it just you just putting out whatever comes in your mind and seeing what happens?
Yeah, it was deliberate in the sense that I've always had this very keen instinct where I hate people lying to themselves. So, yeah, I mean, I can't claim perhaps even level of success that merits that, but I was always that way from a very young age, where I didn't like self-deception. And I saw that people, adults, certainly when I was younger, they engage in that all the time. They make these compromises for their health, their happiness, their general satisfaction with their life as a whole. And they live that way, and they arrive at a place where they are unhappy with the outcome, but that's not accidental. The modern environment that we live in, it allows for an extreme margin of safety. And safety makes people comfortable, but also makes them lazy. All the years I've trained clients, especially working with men, I realize that men really don't respond to, I don't want to say don't respond to kindness, since there is a time and place for kindness, but men don't respond to niceness. Telling a man who's suffering with himself fundamentally that it's okay, you need self-love. Like, you don't need self-love, and it's not okay. Like, you need some level of self-immolation, self-destruction. You have to be able to hate. You have to hate yourself enough to be able to love yourself later. So most of what vexes men today, it's negative emotions. It's not an overabundance of positivity. It's negative emotions. It's negative because of how you lived. So rather than absolve you of that and say, well, let's rechange the definition of masculinity. No, you shouldn't be absolved of that at all. You have to face that and account for that and reconcile with it. You are the way you are because of how you lived. That's why you're like this. All right. So you have some shit that you are very unhappy with. I never lacked physical standards. That's the one thing I've never lacked. From a very young age, I always kept myself physically fit. That's because that's the one thing you have really. That's really the one area that I would argue you have true direct control of. You have other aspects of life, you're going to have to operate within certain systems. I can't control money. I can't control government. I can't control politics. I can control my health. I have control over my actions. I have control over what goes into my mouth. I have control over how I sleep and use my time. I have control over all those things. So your domain of control is actually quite intensive that way. But many people have abandoned that. A lot of men have abandoned that. They just don't think about it. And you'll pay for not thinking about it. All those things that you're unaware of, you will pay a cost for them. So that's where, like, I was, when writing that, even like there was a certain fury, which I think probably helped my male clients, where, I'm struggling with motivation. I'm like, struggling with motivation, what does that mean? Even the language that you say, the sort of this pop psychology you could talk. What does that mean? I'm not motivated. Okay, what does it mean? What's your definition of motivated? What does motivated look like to you? Give me an example. Like, really, really dissect it for me. Like, people, they don't have good answers. It's just a feeling they lack. Like, okay, like, how do you envision yourself? What do you see when you look in the mirror? For myself, I was always very vain, which I would argue as an asset, since I wanted to look heroic. I didn't want to look like the kind of person who didn't care about themselves. And it was very obvious to me from a young age, which I think for most people, that how you look is what you get judged by. So why would you not want to, that alone, why would you not to utilize that to your advantage? Even if you're not an athlete. And then obviously working with clients, it becomes very obvious. Oh, you don't care what you look like, you don't care what you weigh, you don't care about your health. What else are you apathetic towards? Because I guarantee you it's more than just your health. It's probably your relationships, probably with people not mistreating you. If you don't treat yourself right, I guarantee you you're not letting other people treat you right as well. Those things carry over. There's always correspondence. You can never get away from correspondence in this universe. So the writing style, I never hired a writing coach. In college I never took a single class on writing. Last time I probably wrote an essay was maybe senior year of high school. But I found out early on that I have sort of a God-given ability to write. At least writing a lot. I can write very easily. I can put down 1,000 words of paper. And I wrote. Anything that I write is always very within the moment. This is whatever I'm feeling at the time. And most of it stems from conversations I have with individuals, with people, whether they be clients or just men seeking out advice, or women, so on and so forth. So there's a certain kind of rawness to it. But at the same time, it's very polarizing. It's very polarizing. It is very black and white. But I attribute that where it's I refuse to compromise. Like the reason I live my life today as I live it, where I have I have internet money. Like is what I call it. I have internet money. I have get paid while you sleep money. I live my life my own terms. I live in Thailand. My schedule is my schedule. Who I talk to is who I speak with. Even the group I made, the Ajax tribe group. It's men that I know I'm going to get along with. I don't work with anyone that I don't like. So I had all these very hard and fast lines I drew across my life as I slowly got older, where rather than try to accommodate, I just decided to put a boundary. I'm like, I'm not going to do that, but I will do this. What you say no to matters far more than what you say yes to. Far, far, far more. So I try to narrow my life down to what are the things that I will in fact say yes to all the time. When you do that, it might seem like you're creating this narrow existence, but in reality, you have a life of infinite potential. I am very happy with my life. I love how I live. I love everyone in my life. But what did it take to do that? Well, it took all these, it took making these, I want to say bargains, but it took following a creed. I'm like, I will do this, I won't do that. That's not what I'm about. I'm about this. So like really define the parameters by which you want to live. But then that also requires, like, well, what are you doing for work? What are you doing for money? Where are you going to live? What's your relationship with your family and your friends? So you have to draw your existence into ever greater levels of clarity. One of the sort of rules I guess I'd say I live by is that you never want ambiguity to persist in a relationship for too long. What is ambiguity? Ambiguity is a lack of clarity. So you don't want ambiguous business relationships. You don't want ambiguous financial relationships. You don't want ambiguous romantic relationships. You do not want ambiguous friendships. You want maximal clarity in all aspects, especially in regards to the people that you associate with, and most of all in regards to yourself. Again, the principle of correspondence, it's always there.
Brilliant. So obviously, you've built up quite a massive following on Twitter now. Great, you live your life, but it still comes with challenges, with a lot of trolls and a lot of, and especially because you're so polarizing, you get the angry attacks now. Having following you for a while, it suggests that you just don't give a crap about any of it. So how do you deal with all of that kind of attention, both the positive and the negative? But secondly, how do you develop that attitude of literally don't give a fuck about anything?
Well, in one aspect, you always want to give a fuck about yourself. So, like, what should you care about most in the world? It's you. If you have a relationship with yourself that way, then your relationships with other people, they're probably going to be pretty good. What I realized about human beings, and this is referencing to Rene Girard, the principle of mimetics, is that people are always going to imitate and copy each other. They're always going to imitate and copy, and then inversely, they're always going to have an adverse reaction to things that are dislike themselves. So those things that we tend to hate the most are the things that we have the greatest distance from being able to relate to. Now, what does that mean for being like online, having trolls, having critics? Anyone that has a strong message that establishes a position, your position will occupy a spectrum. Most spectrums are polar. They have a north and a south, and east and west. They have this, and somewhere in the middle. By way of having any kind of position, you will have people who are for you and people who are against you. You have to accept that as a reality. If you are going to be more discouraged by the people who are against you there than who are for you, well, a few things could happen. You'll quit, you'll go crazy, or you'll start internalizing those criticisms. Most people play status games. They compete for attention, they compete for approval, and they are driven by the desire to be liked by the crowd. And depending upon the culture you're from, your predilection for conformity, could be more or less. Some cultures are very conformist and have very high levels of expectation. Some don't, but in no circumstance are you ever completely freed from expectations. People are always going to judge you by them. You might live your life in your own terms, but someone's still going to judge you for it. It's going to happen. Now, having that brought to light and realizing that, when people have been critical of me, or whether they're attacking or trolling or just outright venom, I wish you die, kind of messages. I've gotten those so many times.
Oh.
You deserve. Yeah, I mean, it's funny when it happens. Like, wow, this person's really mad, right? But here's the thing: like, I could get into the meta game of like, oh my god, these people are attacking me. Like, I need to attack them back. I need to replicate behavior. Or you could just accept the energy exchange that, you know what, I'm having a lot of emotion and a lot of energy directed at me one way. I can take it in and use it and make it very productive. And this is what alchemy is, and this is even almost like a Sufi idea. That you can take something that is one way and make it into another way. So I can take these people energy from them, and I can channel it into my life, which is quite fantastic. Or I could fall into this mimetic game where someone said something. No, I have to say something back. Now, well, they said, I was accused of this, so now I have to try to deny the accusation. I could do that, but what happens when people do that? They go crazy. I've seen so many people online, whether they be celebrities or e-celebrities, or they develop some level of infamy, where they get this following, the attention, and then it devolves into chaos because everything starts to get to them. They start internalizing all of it, and maybe they don't believe what the person's saying, but they have to somehow tell the person why they're wrong. The person doesn't care why you think that they're wrong. They have established their position already. How you feel about me is not my responsibility. That's yours. Especially if you're not someone that I have responsibility towards, which is 99% of people. I don't have any responsibility towards the population at large. You're responsible for yourself, not for how others feel about you that way. So, what does that summarize into? It's an I don't give a fuck attitude. Like, these people are upset. I don't care. You can't make a person care. Which also, that by itself infuriates people. But then you realize, like, most human interaction, all human interaction is driven by this fundamental belief, this principle, really, that the person is going to care that you're trying to get their attention. And you see this, this is all human behavior. This is how we learn. Human beings are mimetic. We learn by imitating others. That's what language is. How do we learn a language? You hear a sound, you copy the sound. So there's this. It's scientific, I would say, where it's never not the case. If someone waves to you, you're supposed to wave back. If someone says hi, it's rude if you don't return the hello. That makes sense. Yeah, that's being polite. Well, online, someone tells you to go fuck yourself and you're a piece of shit and you should die. Well, they have to respond to this. Like, I said something to them. They're not respond. What? This is what's fascinating to me. When you don't respond to people, they get more upset, even though you made them angry. So I made you furious. Now you're commenting. I'm not replying, and now you're more angry that I'm not replying. And this is why I call it the troll paradox. If you reply to the troll, then what they said was true, because why else would you be replying? If you don't reply to the troll, then what they said must be true because you're not replying. It logically makes no sense, but that's how people operate.
Okay, so you've kind of blocked off the, caring about what the trolls think, but have you also blocked off the positive response that you get? Like, obviously, you're speaking to me now, like 2 years ago. Like I said, I'm stuck, and I'm reading your stuff, and here I am. 2 years later, I've got a lot more confidence and self-esteem, and I'm not going to say that you are the only cause of that, but you were a part of that transformation. Now, does that make you feel good? Is there an ego response, or is there a humbling feeling about it, or is it so common now that it just doesn't impact you? I suppose the point I'm trying to get across to other people listening is, if you stop yourself from the trolls, and you're not going to put your stuff out there, you're also going to stop yourself from helping other people that need your help. So describe some of the feelings that you get from the transformational stories that you get from people who don't interact with you. Like, you probably had no idea who I was for 2 years, but I'm there listening, reading your stuff every day, and it's helping me through. So how does it feel to be helping people who are silently suffering but not letting you know that you're helping them?
No, it feels amazing. I would not characterize myself as an altruistic person. Yeah, I'm not a believer of the mental mindset that one should make a show of doing good that way. We're like, look at me, I'm a good person, I'm helping people. Like, aren't I so virtuous? Fundamentally, everyone does anything for what is partially selfish reasons. You wouldn't do something that feels bad repeatedly. Or maybe you would if you're addicted, but we do things even if we give an act of charity. Are you doing it for the person? Or are you doing it for yourself? It's both. You can't really divide the two. Yeah, that should be acknowledged. But the majority of interactions I've had online, I would say 95% of them are positive. Yeah, the one thing I've always done, which I think surprises people, for those who do interact with me, is that I always make myself available. I'm sure pulling back the mask. Like, very often I'll post on Twitter, like, "Oh, my DMs are open for an hour." My DMs are always open. I've never closed them since I've been on Twitter. And everyone that's ever sent me a message needing help with anything, I've always replied back to. Yeah, maybe I've probably missed a few, but 99% of the time I've replied back. Same thing with emails. If someone sends me an email, I have a question, I'll answer the question. Same thing on Instagram. Every social media account I have, I've always made myself accessible for people. I've seen this so often where people develop fame, internet fame, social media fame, and they're very idolized. Like, it's just, oh wow, you're so incredible, you're inspiring, I follow you. I'm like, that's great. Like, I'm glad I'm doing that for you. Like, you should be doing this for yourself. Like, I don't like idolization. A lot of what I do, oftentimes, with even the way I use social media, is trying to break down sort of that deification image. Yeah, I don't want anyone to deify me. I don't want to be put on a pedestal. Like, it's very humbling when someone tells you, like, you've been like a mentor to me. Like, that's great. Like, I'm glad I'm able to do that for you. But I want you to live your own life, not in comparison to how you think I would approve of it, or needing my permission, or I want to be like you. I want you to carve out your own definition of yourself, of who you're trying to become. And if I influence you positively in somebody to do that, like, phenomenal. But I don't want to be anyone's like personal savior. That's why even I make fun of the sort of that savior complex in general. I'm like, oh, it's your Chad savior here. I'm like, on one level, like, is that true? Yes. On another level, I'm just making fun of that whole, whatever you want to call it, internet idol complex, because I find it very absurd. But at the same time, though, like, I have obviously tens of thousands of followers, and I know it's significant to people on some level, and you have to appreciate that as well. Something I realized personal training, the first year I did it, was that most adults still need parents and coaches. If there is a point in time where people, I don't want to say figure life out, since you can always say, like, no one figures life out. Like, okay, nobody figures life out. But if there's a point in time where people truly mature, it is the point in time where you no longer need someone to direct you. And that sounds simple. Like, isn't that should be what being an adult is, right? You're autonomous, you're responsible, you have agency. You don't need anyone telling you what to do. You don't need anyone telling you good job. You don't need anyone's permission. Yeah, idealistically, that's true. Practically speaking, most adults still need that. all the clients I've ever worked with, they needed somebody to tell them a good job. They needed someone to hold them accountable. They needed someone to show them what to do. They needed some motivation, some self-esteem.
Where do
They
you think
needed
that
someone
comes
to
from then? So where do you think, sorry to interrupt there, but where do you think
yeah.
that comes from? Why do people still need validation and permission? And, why are they reliant on this even in an adult age?
Hmm. Human beings are social creatures. We need communication. Like, we need to talk to somebody. Some people need less, some people need more, but no one exists as an island unto themselves. People get lonely. Um, so having any kind of human interaction, even if it's just small conversation like that, can be very meaningful for people. Uh, yeah, and most people who, the vast majority of people, they live their lives and they don't necessarily have the certainty that they are living a life the right way. They have hesitations. They have areas that are unknown to them. They have parts of themselves they haven't explored. So it's very affirming when you encounter somebody who is strong in an area where you're weak. It is. It's like, okay, oh wow, someone else can do it, so can I. What one man can do, so can another. Yeah, and for most people, the way they live their life at large, like it's a process of embarking on a path that others are also on. Inevitably, comparisons will be made, and you have to find a median point between being happy with yourself, but also using comparison with other people as a measuring stick for where you're progressing towards. Maybe you find that's not for you and you change to something else. But I don't know that you ever fully escape that. Um, is it impossible to? I should say, like, is it possible? It's possible, but it is very uncommon. You do encounter people that way, where like, wow, they just don't need anyone to tell them anything. Like you do, and generally speaking, we do idolize those people to some extent. Like very generic, like Michael Jordan, this hyper-driven athlete, champion, ultra confidence. Jordan didn't need someone to tell him you're doing a good job. He was winning. He was winning. When you're racking up victories that way, you're doing the right thing. So we really idolize that kind of mindset. But how many people really achieve it? Not that many.
Okay, and conscious of the time, but I really want to touch upon your experience with ayahuasca.
Mhm.
I mean, it's become quite a thing. But I mean, the first time, I mean, I've never done obviously ayahuasca or drugs or anything like that. But the first time I really came across it was the book by Dr. Rick Strassman, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, which was around about 10 years ago.
Yes.
And I've always been fascinated by this idea of, for me, it wasn't about taking an external drug to have this kind of mystical experience. It was always about some kind of deep spiritual meditation and growing yourself spiritually, and then having that experience from a place of enlightenment from that kind of area. But obviously people today are taking ayahuasca and having these experiences. So firstly, can you just talk to us about your experiences with ayahuasca, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
Yeah. So I mean, my experience. So I'll preface, as I like to do. Probably be disappointing to people since it was not spiritually enlightening, but I was not seeking enlightenment. Um, like I said, I'm very happy with my life. Like I love my life. Like there isn't anything I could point to where I have any discontentment with at all. And at the time I took ayahuasca 2 years ago, that was pretty much the same situation. Like it was, life was wonderful. So I took ayahuasca this purely out of curiosity. So I did a ceremony with a shaman. It was 2 nights. And I didn't have any expectations on what would happen at all. I just like, look, either maybe I'll get super high, maybe I talk to spirits, maybe it's horrible. Like, let's just see. Like I'm very much a believer that you should have as little to no expectations as possible from experiences. Whether you're traveling, anything, just go to a place, meet people, anything. Don't set up a scenario story in your mind of how it's going to go. Just keep that page blank. Keep it blank and let things unfold as they unfold according to their nature. So I did the ayahuasca ceremony, and the first night was more powerful than the second night. I think I probably needed more of the medicine, as they call it. But my experience was I was in what I would call sort of like a holographic universe for about 2 hours with animal spirits riding around, talking to them. It's kind of like a Disney movie on LSD, on acid, and it was great. It was fucking great. I still remember it very distinctly. I was like riding the snake through this universe. And I was like saying hi to things. I'm like, "Hi, bear." And I was like, "Hi, Alexander." All the animals I met said hi back. Like this was the experience. Like, so I met like, so I saw like a spirit bear. I'm like, "Hi, bear." I was like, "Hi, Alexander." Saw a rabbit. "Hey, hi, rabbit. Hi, Alexander." Everything said hi. It was great. It's like being Dr. Doolittle. And then I had like a come down from it. Like, what did that mean? I'm like, I don't think that meant anything. Like, I love animals. I'm an animal lover, so it was wonderful, best time ever. Now, when I shared that with the group, that was very unlike everybody else's experience. So I was in a group of 12 people. Everyone else's answer as to how their experience went was various degrees of pain, suffering, being within sort of a living nightmare, trauma, repressed emotions, repressed memories, very dark stuff. I saw people I saw people vomiting violently. I saw people crying. People, explosively defecating, having to rush to the bathroom, like having horrible sweats. Being in a state of this, you could tell it's this tortured state. Now how do make sense of that, right? Like, how do you even make that make sense?
Did some of them tell you what were some of the things that they actually saw to make them feel like that? Or did anybody disclose that? Or
they did. But it's very much sort of like horror fiction. So this is like taking like a big perspective now. Like, well, what was your experience? Was it all in your head? I'm like, I don't believe it was all in my head. Like, I don't believe that for a second.
mm-hmm.
The way I would frame this is that human reality, our perception of time, is extremely finite and extremely limited. And we don't fully realize this until we have an extra sensorial experience. So even like our eyesight, we see a very narrow spectrum of the actual visual spectrum that exists. Our hearing is a very narrow spectrum of the actual auditory spectrum that exists. Our sense of taste, our sense of touch, sense of smell. We have these physical senses to navigate the world, but when you realize how limited our senses are to the entirety of what exists, it's probably, I don't think you can even calculate down to like, oh, it's 1%. Like, it's a quantum. Most of the universe that exists beyond our ability to perceive it. I can see the horizon, so I can see about 40 miles, down from my apartment view. That's not 1% of the Earth's circumference at all. Like, so the entirety of the world exists. It's vastly bigger than this. If you take sort of what's called like a Spinozan view of God, where like, what is God? Is God a man? Is God a person in the sky? Like, no, God is all things that exist, and existence reality does follow very fundamental patterns of structure. That's axiomatic. We live in a physical world that has physical laws. It couldn't not have a structure otherwise it wouldn't exist. So if you can sort of accept those the points as being true, as being transcendentally true, then I don't think it is I want to say stretch of the imagination. I don't think it's a preposterous extrapolation to believe that there may be realms of reality that are not normally accessible to us, but that we can access under an altered state. Altered state meaning what? Altered state meaning our brain is a consciousness engine. It has the ability to create patterns. Okay. We know, this is actually fairly well established science at this point. We know that the universe, one of the theories of the universe is that there is a structure of mind. So all things have an element of mind to them. All things have an element of consciousness. We know that certain forces exist only because they are observed to exist, and at that point they will exist. So depending upon our perspective of any given scenario, it will change the scenario itself. It's like the Schrodinger's cat. Is the cat dead? Is it alive? Is it not dead? So you look at the cat, it's a weird thing to think about. Okay. So, taking that into account. So people have these experiences in ayahuasca. They're having these internal experiences where their brain has probably never been put into this altered biochemical state where it's able to produce these kinds of sort of like mental scenarios, these kinds of experiential, journeys. Is it not real? Like, well, how do you define real? Is real only what happens to you externally, or something real because it happens in your head? This conversation we're having right now, you're watching me, I'm watching you. I'm saying what I'm saying, you're hearing it, I'm also hearing what I'm hearing. You're internalizing a certain experience. Is that not real? Because your experience is going to be based upon what? On your mind. The same way mine is. So I don't believe that you can discount something that because it happened in the mind, it is not a real experience. Something could be false compared to actual reality. It could. If you told me right now that you're a black guy, I'm not black, I'm Caucasian. Okay, like that's not real. Certainly, like we can create false situations, but we can also create true situations. This because something is false doesn't mean that does not negate truth. Okay, so we can accept that mental experiences of the mind are real. So people take ayahuasca, they're in an altered state. Their mind is creating things it would normally be able to create. If you are a person where you have repressed emotions, you have repressed memories, you have things that are held back from your normal conscious memory, and they exist in the subconscious, and especially if those things are painful, and you try to avoid those things, I would guarantee your experience is not going to be pleasant. What is most real to you in your mind is whatever has the most emotional energy attached to it. If that's something that's painful, you're going to be led to that thing. If that's something that's happy, you're going to be led to that thing. What makes, this is sort of like the aspect of emotion. Is emotion subjective? Is it relativistic? Like, no. How do we define experiences for anything? By how we feel about them. If you have an amazing experience, so what made it amazing? Well, I'm like, okay, what made it feel amazing? It felt amazing because it literally was an internal mental physical sensation of it feeling amazing. You cannot remove mind from reality. You can't do it. There's no way to. So if in your mind, if in your subconscious, you have a collection of pain that you've never addressed, and then you take a drug that's going to put you into an altered state that will more or less seemingly target those sources of energy, whether they be positive or negative, now that's going to be brought to the forefront of consciousness. And now you're going to have to be put through a gauntlet of enduring it. And that's why for the majority of people I talk to, when they use psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, they have these very torturous experiences. But then what happens? You have a breakthrough of some kind where, because you're living it, reliving it, you're going through these scenarios, you're able to actually inhabit that consciously for the first time. And then in the process of feeling it, you have some sort of emotional mental release, a release of the mind. And now, oh, wow, okay, I'm over it. I'm over it. I've recovered from it. I've healed, whichever terms you want to use. Or for people where very common experiences that they live in their head, they taking psychedelics makes them realize that the world is bigger than what they presume it to be. Oh, help me overcome my ego. I'm like, you can never overcome an ego. Your ego is just your conscious mind at large. What can happen for you, is that your definition of yourself and how you think the world exists, that can be expanded. And perhaps if you live life with a negative kind of ego that's very sensitive, that puts you in conflict with people, and then that gets expanded into a more accommodating ego that's stronger, it's based upon, let's just say, self-love versus self-loathing. It's based upon being accepting versus being rejecting. That could really change your life. It could. This is all 50-50s what ifs. It could. Or you could take psychedelics and it's horrible for you. You never want to do it again. So,
well, what I find interesting, but obviously, because I only, most of my information came from that book, and in that book of Richard Strassman, he basically said that all the people that had a positive experience were in, before obviously taking the DMT, were in a positive state of mind. Their life was good. They were happy. And every single person that had the negative experience, they were already full of stress and anxiety, and all basically the experience that you have is solely dependent on your state of mind before you actually go into that experience. And why I found that so interesting was because on a completely separate topic, one of my favorite philosophers is Allama Iqbal, and he says something like, heaven and hell are not localities, they are states of the mind. Hell is man's painful realization of his failure in life. So I suppose what I'm trying to
Yes.
get is, when you're getting to the point of death, everybody thinks of hell as this fiery physical place where you're going to get burnt, but that fire above the heart could actually be the regret and the pain and the anxiety of not fulfilling your potential, of living a life of anxiety and not doing anything about it. In other words, not changing your state from the negative to the positive. Is there some similarities between that experience and what I'm talking about there, or is that just two completely separate things?
Oh no, I would say that pretty close. That more or less aligns with how I view reality now. Um, it's a very sort of, I don't know, it's a very fundamentalist sort of view of theology. That heaven is a place, and hell is a place, or purgatory is a place. But that's one thing that I realized when I'm taking ayahuasca is that all these levels of reality, all these layers, they all exist on top of each other at all times. So you can separate them by way of perception, but they exist as a wholeness. You can walk down the street somewhere and see someone that's a drug addict or homeless, and they're living in hell. They're already in hell. Like hell is real. Hell is 100% real for them. It's not real for you, but it's real for them. If your life is hell that way, where the strongest part, if your life is hell, where the most deeply held aspects of yourself are existing in that state of hell, state of purgatory, that's where you'll be when you take DMT, where you take psychedelics. If it's not though, then you could the book said, it could be a wonderful experience. Um, but no, like the idea of localities, we arrange things very geographically. We tend to think about even philosophical concepts very geographically because that's how the geographical world works. You go north, you go south. There's location. Well, that must be how everything else works. And like the universe is not that separate. It's not, especially the ties that bind.
Brilliant. And yeah, I mean, I could go on talking to you all day, but let's try and wrap this. So, at the moment, you're in Thailand and you're training with Saga, who basically is the real figure of who the Street Fighter character was based. Is that correct? Is that who the Street
Yeah.
Fighter? Yeah. So just talk to us a little bit about Saga and what you're doing, and then we'll wrap up by a bit about how people can.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about Saga first.
Oh yeah. So Sagat. So it was a dream of mine when I was in college. So dance wasn't working out. The appeal of having to go work was unappealing. It was like a dream where I was like, man, I'd love to go move to Thailand and just train and do Muay Thai. There's only two things I've ever loved doing physically. I love dancing. I love fighting. Those are the two things in life where I will work hard at every single day, and I love it. I enjoy it, and I'll get up early for it. I love doing it. There's no excuses made at all of any kind that come up. I can't wait every day. I can't wait. So at the time I was in college, I'm like, this dance thing isn't working out. I'm like, man, I'd love to fight somehow. I'm like, imagine, and I was going to a Muay Thai gym at the time. I was training. I'm like, it'd be so cool to go to Thailand. Like, yeah, like it was very, it wasn't a clarified idea, but it existed as an idea. But that costs money, right? Like, I didn't have any money. How do you fly to Thailand? Where would I live? Like, what would I do? Like, it wasn't a possibility then. As I got older and I built the business with the career, with training, and then I got to the point where I'm like, well, I have the income, I have the freedom now. I'm like, I can do whatever I want. I can go to Thailand. So I'm in Thailand. And when I got here, like I have to acknowledge certain realities. I'm not 21, I'm 31. So throwing myself into something physically with no thought given to it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna say I haven't gotten older where I feel old, but I've had a lot of injuries. Like, I don't want to go crazy in regards to, okay, I'm gonna train 6 days a week, 2 hours, 4 hours a day. I'm like, I want to do something wrong, and I get hurt the first month, and I'm pissed at myself. I'm like, I'm gonna do this a little bit differently. I'm like, I'm not gonna work smarter instead of harder. I'm going to work smart so I can work hard. So I'm going to maximize my efficiency and my skill with what I'm doing so I can do it at a greater volume. One of the hallmarks of like a fighter when he's on the decline, this is like in professional sports, MMA, you often hear guys say like, oh, I'm not working, it's not about working hard, it's about working smart. As soon as you start hearing someone say that, they're probably going to retire soon because their body can't hold up. I didn't want to be in that position where I'm going to work hard. Oh, wait, no, I can't work hard. I'm like, no, I'm going to work smart so I can work hard. I'm going to do both. So how would I go about doing that? So I had to kind of reverse engineer this process. I'm like, what's the hardest things to do in fighting? It's not the running, it's not the push-ups, it's not doing conditioning. Like the kind of physical stuff is very simple and basic. I can tell you right now, okay, I want you to start running, a mile a day, or 1 kilometer. Start with 1 kilometer, and then we'll slowly build up to doing 6 kilometers. That's easy to do. The challenging part is the actual skill work. It's learning how to punch, learning how to kick, learning footwork. It's learning the actual art itself. It's not the conditioning. The conditioning, the physical stuff, that's just exercise. I know how to do that. It's the skill. I'm like, okay, if I want to improve my ability to train this, I need to increase the actual skill of fighting itself. How can I do that? Well, the best way to accelerate the learning curve of anything is to get a teacher, of course, right? But yeah, again, very axiomatic. All right, who is the best possible teacher I could find that I could get to train me every single day to get better as quickly as possible, geometric rate of improvement? Who is that guy? So I started doing research, and there's obviously lots of great fighters, lots of great champions, but the one person that I found who seemed to, not unanimously, but seemed to have the broad consensus of being like the guy where it's like there's no one like this in Thailand, like the best one-on-one you'll ever have. It was Sagat, and Sagat, I looked him up. I'm like, oh, this is a guy from Street Fighter. So he was, he's considered like the inspiration for the character, partially. But he taught, so he teaches a one-on-one lesson. So I found him in, this was what, May? So I found him in May. I'm like, hey, so we met. I'm like, and he does lots of private lessons, but he's never had anyone hire him for more than let's say maybe 2 days max, a week at most. But I found him. I got put into contact with him by a former surf student of his that trained him a few times. I'm like, so I want you to train me every day. He's like, oh, for a week. I'm like, no, I want you to train me every day for a year.
Oh, okay.
Which is I don't know. To my knowledge, I don't think anyone has ever actually done this in the history of the sport. And I say that not out of ego, but I don't think anyone's ever actually done this. Most people, the way they learn MMA, Muay Thai, boxing, you go to the gym, you show up, maybe you get some one-on-one time with the coach. I don't know that anyone's ever hired a master level fight coach to train them every day one-on-one, and I don't know if it's ever been done, honestly. Not at least in modern history. But that's what I told him I wanted to do. So he's like, wow, okay. Yeah, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard, right? So it's now, we're in what? So it was this is right around the middle of May. There was a week off in between where I got sick 1 week with food poisoning. But so it's been, so end of May, so June, July, August, September. So it's going on for a little over 4 months now. And the rate of improvement has been massive. I mean, just I've documented the process, but I've gotten measurably better every single day since we started. Every single day. And there's other, there's other fighters around, there's other trainers in the gym, and everyone that sees me now, at least, it's where we train at, they're like, how long have you been training? It's 4 months. They're like, you look like you've been fighting professionally, you're pro, you look like you have 10 fights, you haven't even had a fight yet? What the hell? Yeah, that's what training does for you. And personal training's the same way. If you want to get in the best shape of your life, what would you do? Get someone to train you every day for the next 6 months. I guarantee you'll be in phenomenal shape. I've seen so many individuals in the fitness industry be transformed by working with a coach that way that why not apply to something else? So that's what I'm doing now in Thailand. I have a long-term visa, so as you know, it's a 5-year visa, so I'll be here for a while. And the plan is hopefully, I think by the end of the year, I told Sagat, tell me when you think I'm ready. So he's targeting end of the year or in November, December, that'll be the first professional fight. So
Brilliant.
That's what's happening.
Excellent. So best of luck with that, and we're all following the journey anyway. So I will be looking forward to that. Now, let's just wrap up. So obviously you've got a platform now on Twitter, the email list. So just talk to us a little bit about who your ideal client is. What your mission is, and what are you looking to do with this platform that you've now got in terms of helping other men?
So I mean, ideal client, ideal follower, any man that's between the ages of 18 to 45, 50, if you're looking to improve your physical health, improve your physical health, improve your mental performance, your overall self-confidence, like, yeah, like, follow me. Like, I guarantee you I can help you. In regards to, like, where is it going? I'm trying to build a community now of men, which you're part of the group, where I want to legitimately empower a group of men where they have the physical, mental base to really custom design their life as a whole. And everyone's going to have a slightly different definition of that. But the world needs more men like that, where they are leaders, maybe not of men, but leaders of themselves.
Yes.
Not every man is destined to be a king, but every man can lead his own life. And the more men we have like that, generally the more, I would say, this overall prosperity we're going to have. People always look to strong men for guidance that way. So that's the mission. That's sort of like the ideal man. And I mean, it's growing. And obviously, I think hopefully most people listening to this know where to find me. But Twitter, Instagram, the newsletter, and if you're serious, you want a community where you can reinforce yourself, join the group or join the inner circle.
Okay, brilliant. And I will drop the links below this video. And like I said, I've been following Alex's email newsletter, which is completely free, which is ridiculous for the value you get. But like I said, that has been a massive help in my journey. And then he's got fitness programs that are specific for your type. They're not generic fitness programs. Like for me, I am a skinny person, and there is it's literally for me, a skinny program for people in my position. But then obviously there's programs for people who want to lose weight, but they're not just fitness programs. They are philosophical, mental programs as well. So
they're pretty detailed.
highly recommend them, and obviously the community is great as well. So like I said, I will drop the links below. And Alex, thank you for being here. I really appreciate the time. And any final words for people out there maybe who are stuck, and just some last words of encouragement before we sign off.
Yeah, I mean, last word of encouragement. I would tell anyone, you can change your life in any given day. It always starts with one action. Like as all things start, it starts with doing one thing, one time, and repeating it. If you can do that, then your future will be different from your current present.
Brilliant, love it, excellent. Once again, thank you, Alex, and
no problem, brother. Good talking to you.
Best of luck with your fighting career, and like I said, we will be following on.
I'll see you on the inside.
Yeah, brilliant. Anyway, everybody else, take care, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care now. Bye bye.